Hi there, Joy here from Joy Gillard Crafting. Welcome to my new video. This is my second attempt at a sea turtle video, and I liked the other one so much, I had so much fun, but there were some things I wasn't happy about. So I decided I was going to make another one. And while I was perusing, because I decided I don't want to make two exactly the same, I decided I wanted a different angle for the turtle. I wanted like a back. Full back one. And while I was trolling around looking for sea turtle pictures, I found the most amazing picture ever. And it is an actual real life photograph. It's not a painting of someone else's work, which was kind of cool because it answered some questions for me about things like whereabouts the fins, I guess I would call them a fin, comes off the shell and how the shell pattern is and everything. And it also gave me some information that I was wondering about last time, because the painting that I looked at last time had some radiating lines on the shell, and I thought at the time that it was artistic license. But when I got a good look at this particular photograph, which I will try and post on the beginning of this video so you can see what I'm talking about, the actual shell does have really cool radiating patterns. And each pattern inside the shell, obviously the shell grows as the turtle grows, and so it radiates out from a point on each of these with little lines, and it's very cool. So one second, my dog is scratching at the door and he's going to drive me insane. I will go and get him in a minute when his big brother shows up. But if I disappear for a second, that's where I've gone. Oh, and there's Big Brother. I'll be back in one sec. All right, I'm back. So I would really like to try and duplicate the pattern that's actually on the back of the turtle. And originally I had planned to do my second turtle in the same bright tropical colors. And this is the, give you a quick idea here. These are dried out a little bit. Haven't used them for a while, but this is the color patterns that I used, or the color selections that I used for the last one. And I was just going to stick with that and do it from a different angle and try to improve a few things. But the picture that I saw online, photograph, had such really cool colors, radiating yellow color, like it almost seemed to glow from the shell, that I kind of thought, all right, well maybe I will try and do it in actual colors. And the rest of the colors are greens and browns, which, you know, green's not really my favorite color. I don't choose to do it very often, although I love trees and grass and all that kind of fun stuff. It's just, personally, it's not one of my favorite colors for doing artwork. But then I thought about it and I realized that maybe for a bit of contrast, what I will do is I will do some sections of coral in the background, in the picture itself. He is swimming over above some coral, and the coral is the same colors and green tones as he is, really. But I don't want to do that. I still want to get some of my nice bright colors in there. So I have a theory on how to do my background that might be kind of fun. It's going to be an experiment. This whole thing's going to be an adventure. So that's going to be a trial run, and I'm not going to deal with my background at all till later. I learned my lesson last time. I'm not going to get involved with the background until I work on the turtle. And the next thing I have to figure out is how to get the shells to radiate outwards like that in a pattern without the colors all running together. And I have a couple theories. And so, in order to try these theories, I'm going to go totally off the reservation for me, and I'm going to do a trial run. Imagine that. People can do trial runs. And so my thought here is that I can do it a couple different ways. And I'm thinking that in each section, one of the things I can do is, and I'm going to show you the colors I've kind of made up here. I've only made up 4 colors. I have kind of a burnt umber color. In the picture, in the center part that radiates outwards, there was burnt umber. And then there was a row, well not a row, I guess like a radiating area of green that went like this from this burnt umber area. And then there was yellow. And this is the part that I'm going to have a hard time with, I think, is keeping them separate without letting them run together. Or at least to make sure that when they run together, there's still the radiating lines going out. So I may have to do things dry on dry afterwards to see if I can get it right. But I'm going to try a few things on my little test paper to figure it out. So there was the burnt umber, there was a dark green color, and there's yellow. Now I had the yellow I mixed before. I decided I was going to need lots because it's got a very radiant kind of yellow. So I mixed a bit more, and as you can see I got a little bit of a green tint to it because I wasn't cleaning off my brush fast enough. So I kept the two separate just in case I don't like it. It shows too much green. So I have a nice dark green and I have a little tiny bit of a bluish green color because what it was, or how it looked, was the burnt umber and then the radiating green and then the radiating yellow and then another green that was almost the same. Not quite, I think a little lighter on the outside, but almost the same. So this is, as I think, a little bit lighter than this. So my first thought here was that I could do, I'm trying to figure out, I think, like if it starts with the burnt umber, and I'm going to kind of do it backwards because my page is tilting this way, and I don't want it to run the wrong direction. So if I start assuming that I've got an area of burnt umber up here, I'll probably just put more paint on than I need. And then I've got an area of yellow. Because I've got the green, I know the green's going to be stronger than the rest. So it kind of went like this and like this. And again, I've probably put on more paint than I need since I'm just doing a trial run. So I don't want to waste paint. I'm just going to soak some of that back up. I really just want to see if I need to make sure that I dry each color before I do the next bit. Because at this point, I was wondering whether I could put my green in there and kind of do this. If I load up my brush and I kind of do that, whether that would work and give me the look that I want, because it was literally just radiating lines. And because it's running into here, that's not the look I wanted. It's running down too far, and there was a pure area of yellow. So I think what I may end up doing is I may end up doing the umber and the yellow first, and then adding the green. Because it really did have an area that went like this that was, can you still see that? I'm getting a little lower on the page. That was the yellow. That was pure yellow. And that's part of the reason why the pattern looked so fabulous, is because this yellow just popped. And then, of course, if I can get these without really touching them very much, because I don't have a lot of water on it. So if I can get the greens to go in between, but not spread as much, then it may work better for me. Because I need to keep that separate enough that I can have some pure yellow. So I've taken a lot of the paint off the brush for this part, and it does seem to work better. And then I had this lighter green. I'm just going to see how they look together. That was kind of radiating out from behind the yellow. So there was enough of it that it kind of filled in behind where the yellow bits were, between there and the edge of this pattern. So that's a bit better, because this definitely does not give me the look that I want. So if I have some of this burnt umber here and it radiates out into the green, that's okay. But I do need to keep, see this, okay, this is going to be the hard part for me, is being patient enough to let all the other bits dry so that I can keep the colors separate. But this bleeding out into the green, I'm okay with. I don't want the green bleeding into the yellow. So that doesn't work. This does work a bit better. See that better. Because the other thought that I had one last theory on how to do this. And the theory kind of started with my umber. And then it started with my yellow. like so. And then it started with my green in between, also like so. So basically I'm making a kind of a ring of each color. And then the idea at this point was to try and flick from one color to the other and see if I could get them to move all at once so that they would all trail along. Like if you've ever watched the cappuccino makers and you take the one color and you pull it through the other color and it pushes it out of the way. But honestly, it did the same thing as that. The green is just too fresh when this is wet. So the green is spreading into everything else and ruining it. So this was my best bet. This is closest to the look. And I am definitely going to have to let my umber and my yellow dry quite a bit before I try and add in my green. So I'm going to set that sheet aside because I want to use that to test my other theory later on for the background. It's just a scrap piece left from something that didn't work out very well. Excuse me while I rinse my brush. It didn't work out very well and I wasn't happy with it. But since I needed a scrap piece of paper, it's coming handy. Alright, so I'm going to speed the next bit up and I'm going to just go one shell at a time. And I'm actually going to flip my turtle upside down here because if you can see, I've got very faint pencil lines. When I was sketching from the photograph, the radiating lines came out from the tail end. And in some of them, they came from the center, the ones that are the main pieces down the center of his back. And in these ones, they kind of came out from the center of one side, radiating kind of outwards more than inwards, or straight up. And since my paint tends to flow downhill a little bit here, I want to make sure I've got my stuff flowing in the right direction. So what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try to figure out which paintbrush. I think I'll stick with my little, just my medium-sized little guy. I have no idea what size that is. 5. And I think I'm going to do all my burnt umber type stuff first. And the yellow, as you could see, just like last time, when I started out, I did my frisket first. And hopefully this works well because I've been kind of nervous about this particular painting because it does have a very realistic bent to it. The other one I was less nervous because I knew that it was kind of not very realistic to start with because of the color choices. And I thought, okay, well, if I screw it up, it's, you know, artistic license. But this one I'm trying to be a little more realistic with. And so my frisket's been on there for a few days. I was kind of waiting for the moment when I was feeling brave. And this is kind of it. So hopefully that works out for me, that I didn't leave it on too long and it sticks to the page. So I'm just putting most of my color at the top of each one, which actually is the bottom of each one if I'm in the right direction, and then pulling lines out from it. And I'm going to butt my green up to it, maybe even over top of parts of it when I do the green after it's dry. So anyways, I keep getting distracted. I've covered all my little areas between, I guess it's kind of a scale pattern on his fins and things with the frisket so that I would have some definition between them all. And I also, again, did some little droplets in the background. So I did white around the outside, or it should be white around the outside, white along here and in between each section, and then white between those patterns, if it all works out, if it all goes well. I still haven't gotten a chance to really get a good look at what a turtle's eye looks like, because in this case, and it's looking straight down the top of his head, I assume this little part that juts out on either side is kind of like the pocket where his eye sits. But that's at a different angle, so I still don't actually get to see what their eye looks like. Go figure. I did discover, though, that on this part of his neck, there is really no pattern in the skin besides wrinkles. And then right before it joins into where the larger scale bits are, there are some itty bitty little dots, so it's almost transitioning from having no pattern to small pattern and then to great big pattern. And it's a really sudden transition, so something else I've learned about turtles with this project. So I'm following I did little guidelines for myself to tell me where the guy in the picture's spots radiated out from. So I have very light pencil lines that you probably can't see, and I'm just following those. And I'm trying to go right up to the corner of the next one, because obviously they're meant to overlap somehow or other. And this probably is bigger than I need to make them. But as I said, I am probably going to end up covering some of it up with the green just to get the stripes that I want. I don't imagine the first stripes I put down are going to look perfect, so I'll probably end up, as I usually do, I start out small and then I kind of get bigger and bigger until I get it the way I like the look of it, which ends up being way bigger than I thought it was going to be. So that's why I'm not worried about the fact that I'm doing that right now and I'm getting bigger than I thought it would be, because I'll probably cover part of that up with the green. And I may actually go almost right up to this with the yellow. I only have a few left to do. And I'm going to have to go back and take another look before I do his actual fin part, because I can't remember exactly what color variances were there. I know he was mostly greens and browns, but I don't remember if there was, you know, darker around the outside or any of that fun stuff. Now this section, the back ones did actually show visible, like this, visible radiating lines. But the ones on the sides didn't really, and I think maybe just because of the angle of the camera, there's not really a choice, or it's not the right angle to catch that. So I guess I don't really have to worry about that there. I'm going to start, I think, kind of with this color along this edge, but I'm not going to worry as much about the radiating lines because I didn't see it in the photograph. So I'm just going to kind of lighten that spot like so with this color, and I'm just going to build forwards with the other colors. So it just kind of gradually goes from this burnt umber or whatever that color this is. I wish this set that I bought actually did list what the colors were and where they are, so I know what's what, because when you go on a lot of these videos, they'll tell you exactly what colors they use, and I'm a little unsure what colors I'm using. So it looks like the burnt umber that they tend to have in other videos, and they do mention that that's kind of a standard color, is to have a warm yellow, a cool yellow, and then a burnt umber kind of a yellow. So I'm assuming that that's what I've got. All right, so there is my pseudo whatever it is burnt umberish color right there. I'm going to allow that to dry for a minute or two before I mess with my yellow, because I want them to stay nice and rich. So I'm going to pop the camera off and come back in a minute when it's a little drier. I shall return. Okay, I'm back. My burnt umberish color is fairly dry, and while I was waiting for it to dry, I decided I'd go on my computer and find the photo that I was using for this in the first place, and take a look at this area and see what it looked like and what kind of colors these were. And that's when I discovered that somehow between a couple days ago and now, I have somehow closed the page that had that picture on it, and I can't find it. So I'm a little frustrated with the fact that obviously I had a brain dead moment and I did not save the picture that I thought was so beautiful. I did find one that's similar though, same patterns and colors, from a slightly different angle, so I'm going to have to use that as my reference, I guess. And I'm just kind of, I put way too much yellow in that one. I'm butting the yellow right up against the umber because I plan to have green in there, and I want the yellow to show through whenever there's no green. Because the yellow was the color that stood out the most. It really glowed up against all the other dark greens and browns from the water and the rest of the turtle's shell. So that's the part that caught my eye. And I want to make sure I've got lots of it. So I'm just kind of filling in this area. And up against the front edge is going to be the green again, so I'm not too worried about that. But most of it I want to have that yellow. So it turns out that this area is mostly dark greens and browns as well. So it doesn't have a lot of different colors to them. And it might be kind of monotonous trying to figure out how to make sure that the different areas stand out. So I guess it's important, or a good thing, that I put this very definite white lines in between to help me differentiate between his various bits of scaly skin. That one's still a little bit wet. So I can't believe I did that. I can't believe I actually had a picture I liked so much, and somehow or other I did not save it. I've looked in 2 or 3 places. Oops. As I talk, I dunk my brush into the wrong color. I've looked in 2 or 3 different places and I thought I might have saved it, and it's not there. I'm so disappointed in myself. Very disappointed in myself. It's going to make it a little more difficult because although I did find one similar, it's not quite the same angle. However, since I guess I'm kind of making the background up as I go anyways. So it should be all right. And here I said I wasn't going to talk through this because I wanted to speed it up, but here I am talking. Now that I've started, perhaps I should stop talking, pause the video, and speed up the next bit so you don't have to watch all this. So that's what I'm going to do. All right, so I'm glad to say that while I was sitting around waiting for that yellow part to dry, I did find the photo. It was saved as a different file type. Haha. So luckily it is there. And it showed this area as a very dark color. It's almost brown, but with a green tint. So I'm probably going to have to blend something for that. So I'm happy about that. I just wanted to make sure and say that, yay, I found it. And I'm going to start the next bit. Most of it's dry. I've got a couple little bits that are wet. I'm going to try to avoid those. But I'm not that patient, so I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to use my lighter bluish green color, and I'm just going to start going along the edge of this section here and try and just give it enough definition so that it looks like it's radiating. And before I do that, I'm going to stop the video again so I can speed up that section. And then we'll come back and talk about the next step before I do that. Okay, so as you can see, we have taken our blue-green color and we have done kind of a little bit of edging along each of these little shell pieces so that towards the front we've got the lighter blue-green color, and we're waiting for that to dry now. So we did this first, which is our burnt umber color. We let it dry. We put our bright yellow in, our nice warm yellow, and we let it dry. And we used our blue-green to create the little radiating bits of pattern along the edge of the shell. And we're going to let it dry. Now this one here was a little bit tiny wet, so tiny bit wet. So there is a little bit of a bleed here on these colors, but I think still so far I'm doing all right. It's my patience level that's the problem. So I'm going to let this dry for a bit, and the next time I come back, the next section will involve the dark green color. This is the part I'm a little more worried about because obviously it's a nice dark green, so it's going to be quite a bit stronger than the other colors. And the plan is to do as I did here, to use it to make this the streaks, the lines that will come outwards from the center between this color and the yellow. So I'm going to kind of be covering up the edge of some of this burnt umber. So we'll see how that looks. In the meantime, I'm going to go look at my picture again and get it all set up in my head so I know what to do, and let this dry, and I'll be back. Alright, so I forgot about my side shells, so I had to add those in there. The side shells still have to dry, but the center's almost dry. I put the video back on because before I start, I would like to mention that I went back and I looked again at the photo. I try not to do it with it sitting right in front of me because my computer keeps shutting off every couple minutes and it drives me kind of crazy. So, and I'm trying to just kind of look at it and get a general idea and then do my own thing. But what I did notice when I went back to look at it is the dark green is obviously the strongest color, but there are areas in which the dark green actually goes right from the back to the front and covers up everything in between. Some patches are showing one or both of the colors of, well, there's always some of this at the top. Sometimes it covers up almost all the yellow, and there are sections where the yellow glows through the dark green. So I guess I don't have to worry quite so much about how perfectly I put the green on, because it does kind of cover up a lot. It just kind of spreads out like this and leaves some gaps and otherwise fills in. So hopefully this part works out, because this is the part I'm most nervous about. And I'm going to avoid again the outside edge because I just did that. I almost forgot I had to do that along with the rest. I've been concentrating so hard on my centers. So I've got my dark green color, and I've got my itty bitty little pointy brush, and I'm going to give it a go. So wish me luck. It's going to be an adventure. right, so far so good. Fairly pleased with it. I'm just going to move it around and light a little so you can see, hopefully it doesn't drip too much, that it does have a nice variation of colors. I have managed to get it to radiate outwards from the burnt umber color, and the yellow is still nice and glowy, so I'm pretty happy with my progress so far. And at this point, I'm going to start working on these guys. And as I said, I'm going to try and mix up a color that's got some of my nice dark green in it. Well, actually, I think I'm going to use my blue green because I want to keep my dark green so that I can kind of touch things up if I need to without having to remix. So I'm going to take my blue green, I'm just going to transfer it into a different section here. Add a bit more water because I'm going to need lots of this probably. And this is what I've got to choose from for browns. As you can see here. Black, that's gray. This one's kind of a taupe, a grayish brown. I don't think I want to deal with that one. So I have one that's probably quite dark, although I still have some green on my brush. And one that's like, it's like a dark walnutty color, and this is a rich brown. And according to the picture, I'm thinking the rich brown one is probably the one that's going to give me the nicest match to the photo. And it's not really a pleasant color, I guess, once I get my green and my brown mixed. Because green and brown makes mud, really, basically. I'm going to add lots of brown to it because I like the nice warm brown color. And we'll see what we get. So we've got this, get under my light so you can kind of see it. Kind of this rich brown, just a hint of green. I think I want to add a little more of a hint of green. So I'm just going to keep playing around with it until I get it the way I want it. And then I'm probably going to have to clean out my water bowl again because it's going to be full of brown goo. But, so this, again, try and get it under my light so you can see, is the green I have used for the dark. And I guess I'm going to add some of that after all. And see. It's a little lighter now, but it's still more brown than green. Probably should do this off camera instead of on camera, so you don't have to sit and wait for me to mix things. However, I think it's good to know that it doesn't always work out the first time or 2 times or 3 times. Okay, so that's not a pleasant color, but it is kind of what I was looking at. Maybe it's because it's going through the water as well. It really had a very undefined color to it in the photo itself. I'm just going to get my scrap paper here and put some on my scrap paper just so we can kind of get an idea what it's going to look like. Well, it is a greenish brown. It is showing up. See, now that it's on the paper, it shows up more green than brown, whereas when it was in the bowl, it showed up the opposite. Maybe I should have left it as it was and tried it first. Okay, there we go. That's a bit better. Yes, it's kind of a muddy color, but that's about the right tone, the right darkness as what I saw on the video. And it definitely wasn't a pure greenish like that. So, okay, so I'm a little happier with that color. So, I'm going to try to figure out which brush I want to use. Trying to figure out which brush I want to use, because there's small areas, but there's the white stuff in between, so I can pretty much just go right over it, I think. So I think I might just keep using my little guy because it gives me enough control over the edges. I don't want to have to worry about touching the stuff that's wet. So that's my plan. So we're going to speed up the next section as well, and we're basically just filling in because it really didn't have a lot of different variations. I might make a little bit like in here, I added a little bit more liquid to certain areas because I wanted to have kind of more color concentration in some areas than other, and that's going to give me my tone light and dark and stuff, as opposed to trying to do different colors and get them to blend. I haven't had much luck with that. So I'm thinking that if I use the same color but I allow it to be darker in some areas and lighter in others, it saves me a little work. So that's what I'm going to try and do. So as I said, I'm going to speed up the next section again, and we're just going to fill all these in. And somewhere in here I'm going to add these little dots and things. I haven't figured out which color I need to do them in, but since this part was kind of a plain color and this had different dots, I may use dark green for that, so we'll see. Okay, so as you saw, I'm done this part for now, and as I was working I kind of did this color and it was just such a not very pleasant color really that I decided to add in a little bit of green here and there just to give it some variation. Now again, as I mentioned before, sometimes things look a lot different once they dry than they do when they're wet. So it really is kind of hard to tell how it's going to come out until it dries. So I put it in there and then I dabbed it with my, as you saw, with my napkin to try and give it just a little bit of roughness in the texture. I boo-booed in a couple spots there and managed to touch the paint to the canvas, to the paper. So, but I'm hoping that doesn't show up as much once I get the background in. And then as you did see again, I put quite a lot of green in this area. I'm hoping that because the brown wasn't behind everything, that certain parts of it are going to show through as being kind of greenish spots. Which is kind of the transition between where it's just wrinkly neck part and the larger spots on the head. So I'm hoping about that. And then I went back in and I retouched a few areas with the dark green just to make it a different tone. Overall, I'm quite happy with it. Obviously, I'm still looking at him upside down. We'll turn him around the way he's going to be to see how he looks. But I think that's pretty cool, actually. So far, very happy with the effect. So I'm probably going to call it quits for the day because Honey's coming home and I have to make him some supper. And then once it's all dry, we'll come back and we'll do the background. And I have a plan for the background. What I want to do is I want to use my bright tropical colors, which are the ones that were here. And the plan is I want to lay in some loose water, some droplets and little globs of water here and there just at random because I want to allow the color when I put it in there to spread. And then I saw something on, I can't remember if it was a Pinterest or YouTube or something. And it was brilliant. And they had taken a bunch of Q-tips and kind of bundled them together so that the ends of the Q-tips were in a cluster. And they were using it to make flowers. What are those ones called? Hyacinths? That have all the little tiny little flowers all up a stem. And so they were just dabbing it in paint and then dropping it on for the hyacinths. And it occurred to me that I could do that for coral, because the coral does kind of have these little rough curly edges that spread out at random. So I'm thinking if I have some laying water on the page and I take my bundle of Q-tips and I drop it in one of my nice tropical colors, even 2 or 3, if I kind of like, you know, touch each corner to a different tropical color, and then dab it into the water on the page, it might spread and curl much like the coral does. So that's going to be an experiment and an adventure, but we have to let all this dry first. So that'll be for tomorrow. And hopefully in the meantime, this dries beautifully and looks wonderful. So I will see you again soon when we do the next section. Toodles for now. All right, so we are back, and it is time to get brave and do our background. My turtle fella here is pretty much completely dry, well, totally dry. It's been sitting overnight. Because it's got the frisket still on it, I can't really tell how the mottled colors of his fins or arms, legs, whatever you want to call these are. I'm not overly fond with this, so I will probably touch that little neck area up later. But for right now, we're going to work on the background. And as I mentioned before, I have kind of a loose plan in mind for the background, but it's also kind of an experiment. And I'm a little worried because the turtles turned out pretty good, and I don't want to wreck it. But I'm going to get brave about it, and we're going to see how it works out. So here's what my plan is. I have sketched out little areas where I kind of want the coral to cluster. And I still have the frisket in spots that will allow me to have some bubbles. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to loosely put some clean water on the back, and I'm trying to avoid where the turtle is. I don't want to add enough water that it will run over where the turtle is. That would be bad right now. I just want to add enough water that when I put the paint on, it's going to bleed out into where the loose water is and give it a more natural looking shape for the coral, because coral does have kind of a ruffly edge. Now at this point, I've gone back to my nice bright tropical color. So here's what I'm using. I'm using the same yellow that's in the shell because I want to see if I can pull that out in bits and pieces in the coral. I have a nice tropical blue, I have a purple, and a nice hot pink. And I also am trying a second new thing that I saw on a video and I thought was a pretty cool idea. I've gone and I've gotten clusters of my little dollar store Q-tips. I've got 2 of them, different, as you can see, they're kind of a weird shape here and there. So I now have 4 unique clusters to deal with, and I've just gathered them together tightly, and I've kind of tapped them on the table a few times to make sure they're about the same height, and put a twist tie on it. And my idea here is that once I get some wet parts on the background, I'm going to dab these in my paint. And instead of putting it in my palette, I've put it like this because I think I can kind of touch different corners of this in the different paints and do it kind of all at once so they bleed together as well as bleeding into the background water. And I'm hoping that makes it look really kind of organic and cool. It may bleed too much and I end up with some muddy bits. It may bleed just enough to make it different tones of the same colors. I don't know how it's going to work, but I'm going to try it and see. The worst that can happen is I end up going back and putting a whole bunch of green, which is what the original picture was, as the background and muting down all these bright colors if they look really stupid. But I want to give it a try anyways, because mostly I want to see how this is going to work for coral. So like I said, I've got 4 different sides that I can use, and I'm just going to kind of dab them randomly on my water and let it do its own thing. So I'm going to pause the video so the next portion can be sped up, and then I'm going to give it a shot. So wish us luck. I'll see you when it's all over. right, so as it turns out, it's not working at all. So maybe I don't have my area wet enough. I'm going to try this one and just kind of wet it really, really well. And then give it one more shot. Maybe I don't have enough liquid in my actual colors too, so I'm just going to add a little extra water. My nice blue, I've soaked most of it up with the Q-tips, unfortunately. So, and I always start with the blue. Don't start with your blue, it's hard to get rid of. So I'm just going to add a little extra water to these colors. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe there's not enough liquid for that paint to spread well, or it's not soaking it up well in the Q-tip. I don't know. It's very disappointing first attempt at this. And as you can see, I don't have a lot of pigment on there at the moment because I tried to use most of it up already. So let's just try it like that. And it's doing almost nothing. All right, toss that away, that's disappointing. So I'm going to go back to the drawing board and I'm going to mix up more paint for these colors. And then we're going to do it the old-fashioned way. So instead of doing with my Q-tips that I was hoping to shortcut with, maybe it's because, I don't know, maybe they're dollar store Q-tips and they just don't have enough paint in them. I'm going to try one with the yellow because I still have lots of the yellow paint. And I'm just going to put a whole bunch of water in one section and then try it with my yellow. Not a darn thing. Okay, so giving up on that. I'm going to turn it off. I'm going to mix some more paints and then we're going to come back and we're going to dab it in with our paintbrush and hopefully get something similar to the same effect, but better. So I will return. All right, we're back. I have mixed up a stronger concentration of paints and we're going to take another crack at this. Obviously, the way I was planning to do it did not work. So we're going to try again, and I'm just re-wetting because it's had a chance to dry a little bit. I don't want it to be wet enough, like I said, to drip on my turtle because I kind of like the way he's turned out. But it has to be wet enough for the colors to bleed. So I'm going to do this the old-fashioned way, and I'm going to dab in some color in little clusters. Would have been a lot easier if I could get my toothpick or my Q-tip method to work. And when this dries a little bit, I'm going to come back in and touch it with some more to get some darker tones like I did with the green here. But for now, I'm going to try and do one little section at a time because I don't want it to dry while I'm working on it. So I've got my big brush that for adding water, and I'm going to use my little brush, my smaller one here. I can't remember what size it is. It's a 5 or something silly, I think. And to dab in my colors. So now I'm adding some purple to my upper section of coral here. And they grow in clusters side by side. Sometimes they intertwine a little bit. But for the most part, from what I've seen, they kind of have like a section of this color and a section of that color. So that's kind of what I'm trying to do. So I'm going to do a section that's not touching that one. I want them to stay a little bit segregated. This is kind of a strange term for it, but. And I'm going to do some corally color for this one. You can see how the edges bleed. And I also might just kind of go off the reservation a little bit just to try and get a nice shape to the edge. I'm trying to think what color I want to put with that. I think I'll put the yellow next to that one. Kind of in around where I've drawn my little outline. And the unfortunate part about the fact that my other one didn't work is that it's not, I was hoping that because it was dots that it would bleed out in individual spots that were kind of flowery shaped. And like I say, that didn't work, obviously, for whatever reason. So now, I'm not sure the best way to recreate that, so maybe I'll try putting just individual dots and let it sit long enough to spread and see if it would kind of do it on its own. It did a little bit. I don't know if that's, might be getting a little off camera here. There you go. So I'm doing this blue section with it, and it did bleed a little bit here and there, kind of in a nice flowery shape. So I guess that works a certain amount. I wonder if I could add a little bit into the edge of that one. I might have waited for it to dry so it's not bleeding as much now. And then we need to do, I think, a section down here so that part can dry enough that I can touch it without everything all going into one big blob of color. And let's see, I think I want to put some purple on this side. I think it'll stand out nicely. That one's bleeding quite well because I'm on a, obviously I'm not on a level surface. It is tending to run south a little bit, but it is bleeding nicely. I wonder maybe if I should just take this off my, there we go. We'll put it level and we'll see if that makes a difference. So unfortunately I do have a little bit of pigment left from my attempted Q-tip thing here. So whatever color I put in here is likely to have a little tiny bit of some pink and some purple tint to it. Not that that's a bad thing. Maybe I'll put a blue because it's stronger. Maybe it'll overpower the bits of pink and purple that were left over. If they blend in with it, even better, because that just gives me different tones to deal with. So I've got kind of a cluster of blue. Can you see that still? Am I still on screen? I've got my camera facing a different way than I usually do. Normally I put the camera so that the width of the camera is the same as the width of the page. But because my turtle guy is going this way, it didn't quite work out the way I thought it would, camera-wise. So I just went the way that made the most sense, which is for, you know, top of the camera to be top of the page. Alright, so I'm going to put another color in the other section of that. I think I will go with the coral. I think the coral and the blue will push each other quite well. That was pink I just stuck my brush into. And at this rate, it's going to take me a while. So again, what I might do here is stop the camera so that I can put a break into it, and that way I can speed up the next section. And then we'll come back and talk about what worked and what didn't. So I think I will do that.